But at 7:31, straight into it this morning, it's time for the performance rankings.
You know, that wasn't an All-Ireland winning performance.
Probably should have won the game based on their second half performance.
Is it a step too far to say it was the performance so far of the World Cup? Maybe not.
OTB AM's performance rankings with Gillette.
I'm scratching my head. That performances was just lacked that intensity.
Right, where do we start?
We're going to stick a knife or stick a fork, I should say, in Portugal. They're very much done at this point, aren't they? It's a fairly, like last night had the potential to be one of these classics. It was so almost there. It needed an equaliser, or it needed Thorgan Hazard to not score that screamer for this to be a classic. And I'm not sure, do you give up that moment if you had your time back? Do you exchange the Thorgan Hazard moment of magic in order to get extra time and penalties? I certainly would. I think that maybe the game deserved it. I'm not necessarily sure, though, that Portugal deserved to go through to the next round after what's been, I would say, a disappointing enough Euros. Like, people are looking at this last night from an Irish perspective and seeing that Cristiano Ronaldo has failed to capture the all-time international goal-scoring record, and they see Ireland on the horizon in September, and they're thinking panic station.
Oh, we're going to get the opportunity to be there in like Kenny Cunningham for all the great Premier League goals. Yeah. It'll be a mishmash of different Irish defenders as he scores twice to take the record single-handedly. Because is he not level, or is he one behind? He's one behind.
No, he's level.
He's level, right.
He's level, so it's time for him to go one in front, and that could have happened last night. I mean, he had about 1 billion different opportunities from free kicks, which, oh no, Cristiano Ronaldo just 10 metres over the bar yet again. What a surprise is how we tend to look at these things. Like, it's going to be an interesting couple of years in the lifespan of this Portuguese team, because rightly they were tipped as potential winners of this tournament. I would have put them second only to France in terms of squad depth. Maybe I was looking at too much just at the attack, but still, it is interesting when you look at their starting team for a round of 16 match, and the players that they didn't manage to get into the team. Like, the Bruno Fernandes thing is remarkable, really, that he hasn't been able to get into that starting team. And like, I mean, Joao Felix obviously not starting last night as well. And obviously the attack that they have is so good that Jota has been quite good in this tournament, and they have Bernardo Silva as well, that there was never going to be a place for all of them. But I guess we were back to the square one, where it's like you can't fit all of these players into one starting 11, and as a result the Portuguese are going to fall flat in their face. Maybe a lot of people would have seen that coming, but
I mean, the corollary of that is that they have a brilliant bench, and so that's going to be able to change matches in the second half as teams wear down, particularly at this stage of the competition, particularly against the side who had their two best players go off in the last half hour.
Yeah, and like, we'll talk about Belgium as well, and I mean, that's a real experience for Belgium last night to actually try and figure this thing out without the two of them on the pitch, more so without De Bruyne on the pitch. Obviously, he goes off a little bit earlier, and that's something that'll stand them in such good stead as things go on, and as they go deeper into this tournament, and as they try and get this monkey off the back of this golden generation potentially never having got their hands on silverware at any point. But Portugal were in this very unique position of having come into a tournament, having won it, but also being in possession of a squad that is far better than the squad that actually won them the tournament 5 years previous. So I'm sure there'll be questions asked of the manager whether or not we're actually going to have Santos as Portuguese manager when they come to play Ireland in September. I'm not so sure. I think that he will probably take a lot of the flack for last night, that maybe this Greek style, the style that he had success with Greece, has just been copied and pasted to Portugal. How could you do that with all the poetic, brilliant players that you have? At the same time, they have 23 shots last night, 4 of them are on target. Belgium, 6 shots, 1 of them on target, and that's the difference last night. If you have that amount of quality in attack, if you have Bernardo Silva and Ronaldo and Jota, and then Fernandes and Joao Felix to come off the bench, you'd like to think that you might have a better shot-to-shot on target ratio, and you might think that one of them might actually go into the back of the net. Like, I don't know, it would be extremely frustrating if you're a Portuguese fan thinking, where did this go wrong? Because it's not like Belgium shot the lights out last night, and like, I tipped Belgium pre-tournament. I'm not necessarily any more confident after watching that last night, particularly when you see the likes of Hazard and De Bruyne go off. Yeah, it's very hard to know what's going to happen. Very interesting to see exactly what the prognosis for De Bruyne, and it looks like that's the end of Hazard. But maybe Hazard decides he plays through. Obviously he can't, so I don't know. He could just like play with an ice pack taped to his hamstring, and just do Michael Murphy on it, but actually run around with the ice pack actually taped to him.
I mean, Michael Murphy was pretty good for half an hour, right? Or 27 minutes or whatever it was. Like, could you get half an hour out of Hazard? I mean, obviously, it's a career-ending injury if it's not, I don't know. And there's a World Cup on the horizon, so maybe a lot of these teams are looking at this as a bit of a dress rehearsal for what's coming in 18 months' time, next year.
Yeah, 100%. Like, I do... yeah, I think that's definitely the case when it comes to a lot of these teams. I'm not sure if that's the case with Belgium, though. I mean,
but they want to win, obviously, but it's just... so what I'm saying is they're not going to risk anybody who's injured in the match in the rest of the tournament.
Like, what I find quite interesting is like how we're analysing the work of Roberto Martinez at this level. Like, I think pre-tournament, what a lot of people have said Martinez, like, maybe is a stick to beat Belgium with, even though obviously they were quite good at the 2018 World Cup, even though there's been a consistent period where they have been excellent and international football have obviously got to #1 in the world. I just feel maybe when he announces that team sheet last night and it's like, oh, Belgium with a back three of a combined age of 101, they're definitely going to be there for the taking. And actually it was just smart management from Martinez. He was like, okay, Ronaldo, yes, he finished off that counter-attack goal against Germany. Does he still have that explosive pace, and are we going to get destroyed if we don't play I don't know, a Denier or Boyata at the heart of that defence? And he said no, and as it turned out, he was right. I know that's scoreboard journalism, but I don't think there were any opportunities that were created as a result of pace really burning that Belgian back three, and he seems to have a really in-depth knowledge of the players at his disposal, and I think that's actually one of their most important weapons going into this, going into the quarterfinals at this stage, is that they've got a manager who is a bloody good manager for this Belgium team. Okay,
so Belgium would have been in green if they were on their own, but for that it's Portugal in red. Do you fear that that's the end of Cristiano, or he'll just keep going now because do they need him in that team? Is there a possibility that team might be better without him now?
I don't think so. I never really subscribed to the idea that the team would be better without him. I think that if you take him out, say if he's injured for the next game, do you then play a front three of Jota, Bernardo Silva and Bruno Fernandes, for example? And I'm not sure that's better. I think Ronaldo has sort of morphed into more of a number 9, obviously, in recent years. If he comes out, does Andre Silva actually start ahead of him? Is that system dependent on there being a focal point in attack? I think it probably is. I think maybe the failing of this Portugal team, and I know it's, again, coming back to this idea of being a FIFA manager, is not finding a room in that midfield for Bruno Fernandes over the last couple of games. I know he's been shattered, and I know that the season that he's had with Manchester United has just had to have taken a toll on his body. 60-odd games that he's played, or even more, and like that is definitely a big factor in this. But I think you have to find some sort of spot in that midfield for him, even though it obviously lessens the opportunities to actually defend on the counter when Belgium go after you. So I think that's the big thing they need to find, is how to get him into the team rather than whether or not Ronaldo is in their best team or not, because he definitely is right now.
Okay, all right. So that's that. Who's next in red?
The next in red, the Provincial Championships in the GEA. Like it feels that we've been here quite a bit in recent years talking about this after the first weekend of the Football Championship, but I think this is probably why we're putting it in red, is that the repetition that is around this conversation just makes it all the more depressing. Now, in fairness, this time next year we may be looking at a situation where this won't be a conversation, that the Provincial Championships, if Proposal B is picked at Special Congress later on this year, we could see the Provincial Championships as your curtain raisers to the entire year, which I think everybody realises might be a more positive outcome than what we're seeing at the moment. You got 4 major hammerings at the weekend. Kerry, Limerick, Mayo and Donegal all hockeyed their opposition, and there are a couple of different factors at play here when you try and voice your frustration. First of all, there is the idea that maybe the GEA could have played the Tailteann Cup anyway this year, which would eliminate Mayo hammering Sligo, and Sligo could have played for something more meaningful than going up against a team they knew they were going to get hammered by. But then you look at it the other way and you're like, okay, what about Clare and what about Down? Technically, the top 2 divisions would have been not in the Tailteann Cup. They still would have been in this thing. They still would have been getting a hammering. But then the answer to that really might be, well, actually just a little bit more time, more meaningful games, not a pure knockout championship may allow Clare to actually build into a championship, maybe not have to go to Killarney where Kerry haven't lost since 1995 and base their entire championship season based on that one result might be a little bit better. But certainly when it comes to the likes of Sligo, you're like, could they have been served better by even a B championship that was knockout this year, or even just one back door in it?
I think we should just ignore this year and last year in terms of what the structure should be. What should the structures be? The split season is the start of it, and what comes first, is it club or inter-county? There's a strong belief from various stakeholders that the club should be second, and so that the inter-county goes first. I'm not sure about that. I think it would be great to have the first 6 months of the year for club and then the second 6 months of the year for inter-county. But look, we'll wait and see, because obviously the weather at the end of the year for your bigger games, that's what they're more than likely we're going to have inter-county first. And so you've got a limited number of weeks. What do you do with those number of weeks? Like, play the best teams against each other as often as possible in meaningful games. Play teams against each other who are of similar standard. Like, what was the best game of the weekend? I didn't see any of it really, but the Louth Offaly game, listening to the dispatches, everybody said two teams of a fairly similar standard going at it in a meaningful match. Now, would the match be as meaningful if it was part of a round robin or a league?
That's a key. That's a good question now.
It would. It absolutely would. If there's jeopardy involved. If you lose, you're in a relegation battle. If you win, you're in promotion. That's the whole point. People are like, oh, we're going to have... we 3 tiers is the most we could possibly have. Why not have 4 tiers? What's wrong with a 4th tier? This is the moment to rip it up and say every match would matter. Look at the league this year, right? Every single match mattered because the groups were so small. As a result, you were actually able to read something into those matches. Imagine if those matches were actually for promotion and relegation in the championship. How important would they have been? They would have been brilliant.
Yeah.
You would have, and you would have huge crowds at dead rubber round robin matches, because they're not dead rubber anymore if you've got that 4th tier. It makes perfect sense.
Yeah, like that was one of the other questions I had actually, is you see the scenes after Wexford beat Wicklow yesterday and you're like, does that get replicated in a format that's not the Leinster Championship? I think yes, I think absolutely it does. And that's one of the other frustrations about that yesterday, is that when you look for the best contests in football over the course of the weekend, all 3 of the best contests, I would say, came in the Leinster Championship. But none of those 3 victors have a prayer of winning that competition, which... Again, you probably have more jubilant scenes if they're actually winning a game that means something in a competition that they have a chance of winning.
And those players will get better, and that the standard of that competition rises. The so-called weaker counties, all the patronising that has been done, sure, jeez, they're training real hard. It turns out they are training really hard, and there's really good coaching going on, and the quality of football is excellent. And it will get better the more they play in summer. But no, we can't do that. We've got to have... If you actually only have 3 tiers, you will end up with loads of meaningless games, and people will be like, well, this game doesn't matter, I'm not going to it, and players will be like, well, this game doesn't matter, what's the point of me sticking around when I can go off to the States and earn some money? Like, we just need to think this through to the point of what's the best for the players? Games. What's the best for the supporters? Games. What's the best for the competition? Games against equal standards, and let's just do it.
And I think this year would have been a really good opportunity to actually have a trial set up. I think that maybe people point to last year as some sort of beacon of hope for the provincial championships, and I think it's like beyond doubt that Cavan and Tipperary's success happened in spite of the provincial setup, not because of it. And it was not because of the back door that we had these great moments. We had these great moments because there were genuine shocks, and the window should still be left open for those things to happen potentially. But I mean, the likelihood of that happening ever again in such close proximity on the very same day is minimal. And I think what we saw at the weekend was proof of that, really. That
you can have your provincial championship at the start of the year and have a trophy, and everybody's happy. Everybody has the chance to win that trophy, and that trophy is the same trophy that it has been for 100 years, and away we go.
Like, there is a way of preserving both of those things. There is a way of pandering to tradition in a way that doesn't destroy the way modern football should be going, the professionalism that exists at every county level, and it's not just about the top counties. Like Sligo, when the camera panned to a couple of the players on the sideline halfway through that first half against Mayo, it was actually just kind of like a heartbreaking sight. It was like, okay, these guys know that their entire summer is over, and they've been hockeyed to within an inch of their life, and yet still it is a semi-professional setup almost in that county, because that's the way it is at pretty much every county in Ireland.
Okay,
but yeah,
that's the red.
Yeah, that's the red out of the way.
We fixed that. In amber, so the way, if I know that we're getting new listeners every week, so the way this works is red, you've had a bad weekend. Amber is like, well, yeah, could be good, could be bad, could be a little bit of both at the same time. And then green is you've had a good weekend. That's our performance rankings, brought to you by Gillette. Good morning, start with Gillette. Put your best face forward with their brand new and improved razors. So, what's in the amber?
We're going to put the Lions in the amber for obvious reasons. Thought they were quite good for a lot of the match against Japan on Saturday. Thought the Irish contingent did very well. Actually, I think if you're picking one of the nations who came out of the best from Saturday, Ireland probably are the ones. But obviously, it is coloured with a bit of red, and therefore we end up with orange. And that red is obviously Alan Wynne-Jones. It is Tipperick, but mostly, obviously, the Wynne-Jones situation at the very start of the game. 7 minutes in, you think to yourself, right, nice warm-up against Japan, no injuries, nice free-flowing game of rugby. 7 minutes in, your captain, your totemic leader, the player that the head coach trusts more than many other individuals on this planet, goes off with, you knew there and then that this was not going to be something that would lead to him playing in the tour again this summer. So that's how it goes into the grand, and it immediately dents the Lions' chances against South Africa this year, but it immediately gives someone like Conor Murray this really unexpected opportunity to be a Lions captain. I'm not sure about you, but I don't think anybody saw this coming when it came to who would actually fill the void of Alan Wynne-Jones. I thought maybe Owen Farrell might be the person to step up, but maybe his place in the team isn't guaranteed. And
It obviously isn't, yeah.
yeah, and that's why they arrived at this decision. And it's a really exciting opportunity for him. And I guess you just think about even the last Lions tour, and maybe coming into this Lions tour as well, that there was never serious questions about him being the first choice number 9. Maybe that's as a result of maybe a few other contenders not being of the strength that the contenders are at out half, for example, or in midfield, for example. But Conor Murray's somebody that has really earned Warren Gatland's trust over the last 4 years, not just during this tour. And maybe we might have seen this coming, but I do think it is a bit of a bolt out of the blue.
These are Conor Murray's boots from the last Lions tour, the one that is that the dirt from down under? Certainly, yeah. And you think back to what the Lions did. They drew a test series in New Zealand, and I guess when you're looking back at the history of the Lions, it's such a big deal when they win a test series because it almost never happens. Like, it's actually quite difficult to go to a country who play together all the time and beat them over 3 matches when you've got a scratch team together. Obviously an unbelievably talented scratch team. So I can see why, if you're Gatland, you're looking at like the players who have done you the thing that you wanted them to do and done it so well. And the other thing about this is Conor Murray's like recovery from the position where we were like, is he really in the first team for Ireland anymore? I mean, should we maybe take him out of the first team for a while and get his form back, to the point where he's now going to go and captain the Lions in South Africa, assuming the tour goes ahead, is a sensational recovery. And it speaks to his character, it speaks to his temperament, it speaks to his talent, it speaks to his application. Like, that's about as ringing an endorsement as you could get. And does it all of a sudden mean he might be the Ireland captain? Do we have to like go and say, well, good chance he's still going to be around for the World Cup at this point? The pressure coming from Craig Casey is like 15, 20 minutes at the end of a game, as opposed to, are we going to start Craig Casey? And then, I don't know, did we miss this? Did Irish rugby culture miss the fact that in the midst of it, right here is somebody who is... Because do you remember the try that he scored against Wales, where in the Six Nations, where the ball kind of broke loose and he patted it down in the middle of it? I was like, look at that giant rugby brain. Look at that, where he's essentially explaining the rules to... Maybe it wasn't against Wales, was it?
No, I can't remember, but I know the one you're talking about. And he's done that on a multitude of occasions where Ireland are at the line, and I guess that's certainly something you needed to have in your locker under Joe Schmidt. That was especially off like a line-out maul, for example. When Conor Murray was at the base of that ruck, you kind of think to yourself, right, this could be try time here, because he'll find a little inch, or he'll know, as you say, the exact quirk in the rule that will allow him to dot the ball down. Yeah,
and so all of the biggest victories that we've had, Conor Murray's there from an Ireland perspective, and obviously arrived fully formed essentially into the team out of nowhere. And whatever happens now, like, assuming this goes ahead, and I really hope that they can get the COVID situation under control in South Africa and find a way to play the matches, assuming that it's somehow safe and morally safe to do so, which is not guaranteed at the moment. But what a brilliant endorsement of him as a person.
Yeah, and like has Irish rugby missed it? Like I do think the starting player factor is a big factor in all of this. Now, in fairness, if you were thinking Ireland player who will be picked as Lions captain, you would have been thinking Robbie Henshaw maybe straight away. Like I'm not sure even of the guaranteed starters, he would have been the person you would have gone to if you were picking it. But clearly, Gatland is seeing something here that it is that leadership quality, it is that in-game intelligence. Maybe his position helps as well. And
I think if you were handicapping it, you would have made Henshaw favourite, you might have made Henderson second favourite, you might have made Tyke Furlong third favourite, and then you would have been like, yeah, I can see how, at like 9 or 10 to 1 of the Irish players. If you were told an Irish player is going to be made captain, you might have had Murray at fourth, and then when somebody from outside says, "What are you talking about? That guy's your guy," you're like, oh, maybe he is our guy.
And like this is really interesting as well when you think about what the learned experience from the Lions is for other coaches who actually go in there, where if you are a coach of a national team and you're in there working with Warren Gatland, those conversations that you're having with someone like Gatland who's like, I actually identify a personality trait in this player that you potentially haven't identified, that can come right back to your test team, to your national team, and have huge benefits for you. Like I guess if you go back 4 years, Peter O'Mahony would have been captain of the first test. Obviously, Rory Best was captain at that point, and there was never any question about it. Like maybe this is just more noticeable now, or more of a talking point now, because the Irish captaincy was a talking point over the last little while, and obviously just with Best being there, that was never up for debate 4 years ago, whereas now it certainly was. And with Andy Farrell, he obviously saw Johnny Sexton as his starting 10, and that was the way he went.
But like now wouldn't the right thing to do be to say, you're going to have to nail down your position, and as a result of that, we know this guy's going to start. Like it's a shoe-in for James Ryan to be Ireland captain is what we've been told now for the last couple of years because of the quality of play he's had. But again, there's somebody who has had injury problems recently. Listening to the pay-per-view yesterday, Gavin Cumsky was making the point that he played 80 minutes of every game as a 22-year-old, and there might have been some repercussions for that in terms of the body issues that he has at the moment, and that's the type of thing that will hopefully ease over the next while, and so you manage that properly, and there's strength and depth in the second row, so it doesn't really matter if he doesn't play every minute of every game. Do you just say, right, Conor Murray's going to be more than likely our starting scrum half for the World Cup, and so for consistency's sake, because there's no guarantee Johnny Sexton's making it to the World Cup, there just isn't.
No, and I do think that the analysis has kind of thrown the two of them in together. It's like, oh, there's two people who aren't kids anymore as our halfback pairing, and as a result of that, they're the same. And actually, they're at very different stages, clearly. As we can see, one's a Lions captain and one's not in the actual squad. I do think what's going to happen over the next little while is that there will be an analysis of Conor Murray as captain. And in a weird way, this could almost be a trial run for his national team. Well, it's like being captain at a higher level.
Okay. All right, let's move on. So that's the Lions. We'll talk more about the Lions a little bit later on with Maddie Williams. And you can get all of our rugby stuff if you subscribe to OTB Rugby on the podcast stream.
Next up, we are going to the Clare hurlers. I'm putting them into the green. Like, I mean, this was not a perfect performance from Clare whatsoever. They had 22 wides yesterday, which is just a ridiculous number. They had more wides than Waterford actually scored over the course of the 70 minutes, which is...
I think they had 11 after 22 minutes, because they definitely had one every 2 minutes in the first 20 minutes. The stats from this match were ridiculous, right? 5 minutes in, Tony Kelly had scored 3 points. He was on course for a 42-point haul if he'd managed to keep up his first 5 minutes over the course of the 70 minutes. I had to do the maths and mental gymnastics, and I was like, hang on, what's the scoring rate at the moment? And I don't know if you remember, we had him on last winter, and he was like, I just love winter hurling. I love the feel of the ball in the air. And we were all a little bit concerned that his form wouldn't be as good when it was sunny out. And then first 5 minutes, you're like, boom, boom, boom. Wow, okay, this guy's still just as good as he was.
Yeah, and like Tony Kelly, it's impossible to not frame the conversation around him, especially when the first moment of the game, it's like Tony Kelly's full forward, and it's like, all right, well, this guy's worth watching for the full game because it's an interesting tactical tweak. For me, though, it's the way Clare set up against Waterford, and like, I mean, it's pretty basic stuff, but they obviously thought that if they can get Waterford to go with the puck out short and then blast the ball in on top of their backline, they will be totally fine. And as it turned out, that's exactly what happened. Like, you've got John Conlon at centre back, who that position would have raised a lot of eyebrows for people like me, people who don't know the ins and outs of Clare hurling at the start of the league, but now we're seeing why Brian Lohan arrived at that decision. His vision from that position is incredible, and also he's pretty good at fielding a high ball. It turns out fielding a high ball as an attacker or a defender actually does not matter one bit, and they've got a man mountain there at centre back, which is a big factor. They've also managed to, I don't know, like I'm not saying that this was a factor in any way leading into the game, but all of the external noise is part of us putting them in green this week, because it plays into the aftermath if they lose yesterday. If they lose yesterday, we're like, what a disastrous couple of months it's been for Clare hurling. Everything off the pitch, God, they'd want to sort their act out. And avoiding that is a real testament to Clare character, I think, and getting a Munster Championship win for Brian Lohan at last is a really important moment against a team that, well, as the team, I should say, who were probably seen by many as the weakest team in Munster. To beat the team who got to the All-Ireland final last year is a really good start for Clare. Like, again, you can look to 22 wides, but I think all the boxes that you want to be ticking after the first round, with the exception of the accuracy, are extremely positive.
Yeah, I was very impressed by them. And imagine if they could do half the amount of wides in their next game. Like, they really killed Waterford yesterday. They just didn't kill them on the scoreboard.
No, and the concern is obviously how Waterford came back into the game late on. And if Waterford could just create a goal chance, it might have been a game, but it didn't look like creating a goal chance at any point. Even late in the game when they were going for goal, I was like, just take your point, bring it back to 3, and then get one more puck out and see what happens. But it's crazy to think that they had the opportunity to bring it back to a goal, which is maybe the reason why a lot of people might actually have Clare in the amber going into this Monday morning, and a lot of people still won't have them as potential Munster champions. But stranger things have happened, and like a grinded out, imperfect win is a really impressive thing, and always gets good marks in the performance rankings, I think.
All right. So the final green one this week?
Not so much performance that was ground out. Like, can we do like an overreaction Monday?
Yeah,
let's like, I mean, and that is the disclaimer, everyone. This is an overreaction to everything that's happened. I tweeted out on Saturday Aidan O'Shea's goal for Mayo, and P. McKeever 2020R got back in touch with me and said, can look forward to another 2 weeks of usual Aidan O'Shea Mayo loving on OTB.
Yes.
I suppose now he's tearing it up against Division 4 opposition.
Yes.
Hashtag flat track bully.
Yes.
And
Let's go
P.
for
McKeever 2020R, that's exactly what we want to do right now. The Mayo thing is real. I think that
Mayo for Sam.
Mayo for Sam. I think that on there is a case to be made that on the evidence of Saturday, Mayo could push Dublin closer than they did last year. I think even Overreaction Monday cannot handle the take that they might beat Dublin. I think that would just be too hot to handle on a Monday morning, especially at 7:58. But I do think that the fairly tepid take that they could come a little bit closer to Dublin this year may manifest itself in reality. Like, I think we were talking about this on Friday's show, but they got cleaned out with retirements. They got cleaned out with injuries in the course of the off-season. They still managed to field 10 of the team that started against Dublin in the All-Ireland final last year. In the midst of all that turbulence, to still have 2/3 of your team starting is pretty good turnover. It's a pretty good statement to say, yeah, we're actually on the right path. All those young players that you saw last year that played really well, that didn't retire and didn't get injured, yeah, they're still going. They're still going to take a step up. And you look at McHale, you look at the kids who were already there last year, and you're like, hold on a minute, there's a number of green shoots here that are going to be vital for Mayo throughout this Connacht Championship, and we'll probably get them over the line in this Connacht Championship.
Just think about what it must have been like in Mayo for the last 2 weeks. Every single preview, every single conversation, every single pundit, and every question they got asked on the street was, well, you're now, aren't you? Because Killian's gone. That's it. It's over, lads. You needn't even bother showing up. What would the impact of that be on a bunch of personality A type alpha males who are fairly used to, conditioned to being successful over the last decade? And the kids who are coming in are clearly like part of a strength and conditioning program from the time they're 15.
Yeah.
Like the athletic profile, as Jim McGuinness talked about, the players coming into it, is off the charts. So what was the reaction likely to be from that group? Even listening to James Horan, he'd practiced his line when he was talking to Joe on the show about like other players, everybody else. It's unfortunate, but we moved on. Next man up.
And the thing we need to remember about James Horan is that he didn't go back in to take the Mayo job in order to steady the ship or to stop them going down to Division 2. He went back in to win an All-Ireland. Now, of course, part of that is realising that you've got Cillian O'Connor and Aidan O'Shea and Diarmuid O'Connor playing really good stuff. And, of course, that impacts his All-Ireland credentials. But I would say the main reason he goes back in is that he's on the phone to people, he's had enough club games, he's had enough underage games to realise that there is a generation that's after coming through completely under the radar in Mayo because they haven't won any All-Irelands, that is ready to contend at senior level. And what we're seeing now is that these guys have immediately become leaders. Everybody has to step up this year because Cillian O'Connor isn't there. The scoring threat has to be shared a little bit more. Granted, the scoring threat kind of was still down to Aidan O'Shea at times on Saturday, and people will, the criticism will always be there of Aidan O'Shea until he wins an All-Irelands, that he does not do it on All-Ireland final day. But he is, there's no getting away from it in that form, unmarkable at times, and he is a force of nature that can't be stopped sometimes in the Connacht Championship. But it is just the Connacht Championship, and maybe it is an overreach to say that this will actually be present when they get to an All-Ireland semi-final, if they get to an All-Ireland semi-final against Dublin this year. But I just think that we could be sitting there thinking, right, why didn't, like, where...
How do we miss it?
Kind of, but like I know they were All-Ireland finalists last year, but I just think that this is now going to be a far more hardened bunch going up against Dublin this year.
Well,
than they
the
were last
assumption
year.
was that they had gone backwards from last year's All-Ireland final based on the fact that they were playing Division 2 football, and now that they were going to be missing Cillian O'Connor as well. But actually, the vast majority of the championship, or of that panel, is young players who are, you know, this is their second season. This is the progressive colts. This is all the horse racing language that you use about a 2-year-old becoming a 3-year-old, or the 2-year-olds over the course of the season getting better and better. Like, is Oisin Mullen potential footballer of the year? Like, is he at that level?
It's the next step up, isn't it? Your young footballer of the year done. It's the only place left to go is actual footballer of the year. Like, I'm really impressed with like what they're showing in midfield, which, like, for me, when all those retirements happen, it's like, oh, there's a lot of big, tall midfield, middle third men after leaving the panel at this point. And you've got Loftus and Ruan now, and it's like, there's your midfield too, who can maybe go toe-to-toe with a Dublin midfield. Again, everything is distilled down, and Mayo's season will be distilled down to that one game, which will be the Dubs.
We're just blah-blah-blahing the Dubs into being the same team as they always have been. There's Cian O'Sullivan gone at the weekend as well. Another body around training, driving standards last year. And it's like, okay, so the team that won the All-Ireland didn't have 5 or 6 of those players who had 3 or 4 All-Irelands, 5 All-Irelands in some cases, on the field of play. But that matters. I do think that matters.
I agree, and that's actually part of this as well, that maybe they'll come back just a little bit to Mayo. Like the O'Sullivan thing, we'll get into it with Anthony Moyles later as well, is an interesting one, because I think if you read Bernard Brogan's book or listen to Paddy Andrews talk, like, the role of that sort of player can't be overstated.
No.
Like, the information that they literally pass on verbally to other players, it is actual conversation saying, you do this in this situation.
Well,
it's not like
they've got the culture right. They don't see you as well, obviously you see these players as threats. That drives you on, but you are open to the threat. It's 4 minutes past 8 this morning. Every Monday morning in OTB AM we give you the chance to win a Gillette starter pack here on the performance rankings. All you got to do to be with a chance of winning is tell us who you think should be discussing, the good, the grand or the bad. Get in touch and we'll pick a winner before 9:30. You can do that on Instagram. So that was our overreaction. We understand that this bit gets cut out.
Yeah, like we're talking into the ether now. Hello to everybody who's not on Twitter looking at this clip.
Yeah, Paddy Clifford should be in green, says Will on YouTube. He's playing the playmaker Linkman role very well. Kerry's version of Kieran Kilkenny. We'll talk about that a little bit later on with Anthony Moyles. Shifty Lad says, good morning lads. Jesus, Wicklow with a lock in GAA pick for Will. See how that ended? It's the hope that bloody kills you. Mayo for ham, says Andrew Garrity. That's Kildare, Andrew. And Brian Smith says, stop lads, Mayo won't even win Connacht. Open your eyes. That is this week's performance rankings.
OTB AM's performance rankings with Gillette.